Hey, this is Mr. Ng going over Precalculus Chapter P test taken September 25th, 2017. Question number 1. Simplify the expression u squared v to the negative 3 all over u to the third v parentheses to the negative 1. So you'll see that I am distributing this negative sign. This is the power rule of exponents. So v here doesn't have an exponent, so 1 times negative 1 is negative 1, and then that also becomes a negative 3. So anytime it has a negative exponent, you're going to move that one up. This one's going to go up. This one's going to go down. I have u to the third times u to the second, so multiplying the same base, add the exponents. 3 plus 2 is u to the fifth. When you have 1v to the numerator and v to the third in the denominator, those will cancel and you're left with v squared. So here's an example where the student just, let's see what they did with their work. They got the v to the negative 3. I don't know how they got v to negative 3. Oh, the original problem does say v to negative 3, v to the negative 1, u to the negative 3. So that was correct right here. They didn't, okay, so if you're doing, here, if you move this one up, that'll be v to the positive 1, so it'll be negative 3 plus a positive 1. This would be v to the negative 2. And if this is v to the negative 2, it would go down. Same thing here, the student distributed the negative sign correctly. But they got this one incorrectly as the answer. So the u would end up on the bottom if this was a positive 3. Alright, if you just go ahead and expand your scientific notation here, you'll get C has them from least to greatest. The student has, they took 2.7 times 10 to the negative third, so here's the 2.7 where my cursor is, and because it's a negative, you move it to the left 3 places, 1, 2, 3, so you have 0.0027. They did the same thing with 7.2, 1, 2, 3. And then over here, 2.7 twice, 1, 2. So you're going from the smallest to greatest. So 0.0027 is smaller than this one, 0.0072. So it's kind of like 2 tenths of a penny, 7 tenths of a penny, and this is actually 2 pennies. Question number 3 says, find the center and radius of the circle with a given equation. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to change, I have the x minus 2 squared plus y squared. So the y squared doesn't have a constant with the parentheses. You can just put it minus 0 equals, I changed 9 to be 3 squared because in vertex form of a circle or standard form of a circle, it's x minus h plus y minus k squared equals r squared. So I always encourage you in class to go ahead and write the formula below it or above it so that you can see that the minus sign is not included, so the h value is a positive 2. K value is 0 and your radius is 3. So your center is located at 2, 0, comma, and then your radius is 3, which is choice B. So the student wrote down the standard form above it, wrote the problem incorrectly because they had the y squared there, so that 2 shouldn't be there. And they didn't see the K value should have been 0. Maybe this one they thought, well, if you take the square root, then r is equal to 3. Question number 4, you're supposed to solve an equation. I actually took this problem from a previous quiz, but then I blotted out whatever was there. So be careful that you're not trying to memorize answers. There I'm just getting like terms together. So subtract 5x, so you're left with 2x equals 0. We're subtracting the 4 at the same time, so that's negative 23. Then divided by 2x. There I stop right there because it says 2x is equal to, so I don't need to find x and then put it back and then multiply by 2. Although I'm grading, I'm not for multiple choice, it's just right or wrong, so I'm not grading the work, but it looks like the student didn't have any work, so they were guessing here. Here the student solved for x to be negative 23 halves, and you put it in there, and you multiply by 2, you notice that the numerator and denominator cancel with the 2's there. Question number 5, it says simplify, so you have in 2 sets of parentheses. Inside here in the parentheses, there is no plus or minus, so it is multiplication. You have a binomial times a binomial. And then to do that properly, you're doing the FOIL, or I'm doing this box or area model here. You're multiplying first. So 9 times 2 is 18, 9 times 8i is 72i, 2 times 5i is 10i, and 5i times 8i is 40i squared. Then you're going to combine like terms there. So those are my like terms. And remember, I squared is equal to -1. So you do the substitution here. 40 times -1 is -40. -40 plus 18 is -22 plus 82i. That's choice D. Here the student distributed correctly, but then didn't recognize that 40i squared is not simplified. They didn't know that I squared is equal to -1. Example of student who multiplied these correctly and even has the correct answer here, but didn't identify that there should be a plus, and then they circled the wrong one. So definitely pay attention to what you're circling. Question number 6, fill in the blank square so that each row and each column contain all the digits 1 through 4. Numbers and the cages may repeat as long as they are in the same row or column. So I got to use numbers 1 to 4. And you're looking for the freebies here. You got a 1 right there. You got a 4 right there. Put it in there. Here I need to think of two numbers that multiply to be 4. Well, that's you can't do 2 and 2 because it's repeating. So it's got to be 1 and then a 4. I can't put a 4 here because that'd be repeating. Then you have 1 and 4 there. Then I'm thinking to myself, well, I'm missing numbers 2 and 3. So you can come back to those. No, it's a 4. You're missing, here I need 3 numbers to add up to 6. Well, I'm missing 2 numbers, 2 and 3. So you can put that there. You know you can't put a 1 in here because you have 1 down here. So 1 must go up here. There you need 3 numbers that add up to be 11. So all 3 numbers, it has to be 4, 4, and 3, and you can't put the 4s adjacent or next to each other, so it has to be in the corner. So 4, 4, and 3, and that would leave you with a 2 there, and that has to be a 3. And then here you need 2 numbers that multiply, that subtract to being 1. That's not a -1, so that'll be 2 and 3. Remember, you can't put a 3 here because it'll be repeating, and you can just fill in the rest. This side was 2 points for writing your name nicely, 1 point for circling a period, 5 questions at 2 points apiece, and then the can was either 1 point or 4 points, so 17 points for that side. Example of some student work, I noticed that although the numbers are not repeating per row or column, I recognize if you check them, 1 plus 4 plus 2, that equals 7 and not 11. Example, they did not have any repeating numbers in the rows or columns, but again, if you double check, 1 times 2 is not 4. So double check your math operations there. All right, on the back side for the free responses, make sure to show all your work and box your answers. Number 7, graph with intercepts and vertex. So I have the absolute value of 2x plus 3 is greater than or equal to 7. Remember, when your interest in someone else is great, you should split up, or the word split up should be an or. So notice how the bars here are isolated. There's nothing in front or right there. So to do this problem, first I wanted to find the intercept. So this is how I graded you out of 4 points for this problem. Be able to find the intercepts, 1 point for a correct graph, that's an absolute value, and 1 point that you found at the very bottom says interval notation. So if I'm going to find the intercepts, let's set it equal to 0. And for a y-intercept, you're making x equals 0, so 0 times 2 is 0, 0 plus 3 is 3, absolute value of 3 is 3, 3 minus 7 is -4. Now, to find the x-intercepts, you are essentially putting y equal to 0. And if you do that, you essentially have this absolute value equation. Absolute value of 2x plus 3 equals 7. So when you split them up, you make 7 here, 7 here. You make one side positive, one negative. Don't need the parentheses or the plus sign. Subtract 3, divided by 2, x equals 2. And then on this side, you can divide both sides by -1. 2x plus 3 equals -7. Subtract 3, 2x equals -10. And then divided by 2, you get x equals -5. So then you have these 2. So when you graph it, those are going to be our x-intercepts right here. And then your y-intercept is -4. To get your minimum or your vertex, you could have just used your calculator to do second calc and then identify your minimum. And then in this problem, it does say where are they greater than? You need to split them. So splitting, absolute value equation is a V, and we're looking towards the ones that are going in this direction. So values that are bigger than 2, including 2, and numbers that are less than -5. So from negative infinity to -5, and then 2 to positive infinity. And you said it was a split or an OR, so you're going to have a U as your symbol there. Here's my little trick there, right? Upside down would be like an AND problem. All right, so in the student work, the student got the 2 and -5, but when they graphed it, they did it on a number line. So when it said graph with intercepts, you should have one number hinted, well, intercepts can't be on here. And then the second clue was I actually gave you a coordinate plane of X and Y, so you should have graphed that. So if you got the numbers, like in this student, 2 and -5, I gave you 2 points. I gave this student 3 points because not only did they find 2 and -5, but their graph actually shows an absolute value, a nice V there. They just didn't get the interval notation to show that they were supposed to be greater than. Here's an example of me showing that student got 2 and -5. I didn't want a number line. If I gave you a number line, I would have shown that too, because down here they didn't use it correctly. They thought I was just on the x-axis. That's not what I was looking for, because remember you have intercepts, keyword intercepts, which we practiced in class. Question number 8 says find the exact distance between points E and F. So here's E, there's F, write down the coordinates, 2, 3, -3, 0. I use Pythagorean theorem, you can just make a right triangle, count down, that's 3. Count towards F, that'd be 5. I label my sides A and B. C is the most important. That's across from the right angle. That's called the hypotenuse. Pythagorean theorem, C squared equals A squared plus B squared. Substitute in your information. 3 squared, 5 squared, 9 plus 25. C squared equals 34. And C equals the square root of 34. An exact answer has no decimals. If I wanted decimals, I would have said around to the nearest 10th, 100th, something like that. So remember, you got 2 points for just writing down the correct formula. So you wrote down the Pythagorean theorem, got the rest of the problem wrong. At least you got 2 points. If you use the distance formula, remember you guys had the formula sheet, so you could write it down. Many students didn't write down the formula, or they wrote it down incorrectly. Distance equals square root of x squared minus x1 squared plus y squared minus y1 squared. When you substitute in your values, it doesn't matter how you label this. E could have been your second order pair. Just remember that there must be a negative sign right there. x2 is -3, x1 is 2, so -3 minus 2 is -5. -5 squared is a positive 25. Over here, same thing. Y2 is 0, y1 is 3, 0 minus 3 is -3, -3 squared is 9, and then 25 plus 9 is square root of 34. So you got 3 points if you made a decimal. Student didn't read correctly. Circle distance, they gave me the midpoint formula. If I wanted the midpoint, I would have said the word midpoint. Here, circle notes. Student should have been order of operations. This should simplify what's inside the parentheses and then do the exponent. Wrote down the correct formula, put a check. They got 2 points, but notice how their y2 value is 0, and then they substituted an a 3 there, so they didn't substitute correctly. So I gave them 2 points for just having the formula. Example of student work here, 25 plus 9 is not 32. Use your calculators, and I gave student 3 out of 4 points because they made a minor math mistake. All right, so the first thing it tells you is draw the graph of y equals 1/2 x plus 4. And then it tells you to find the equation of the line that is perpendicular to y equals 1/2 x plus 4 at -2, 3. Draw the graph of the new line. So if you drew the correct, so 1/2 x plus 4, there it is, down 1, left 2, that would have given you your regular slope. And then if you graph the blue line correctly, I give you 2 points. Or if you knew your slope of the second line should have been -2. Remember, slopes should not be the same. Perpendicular slope, slope 1 times slope 2 is equal to -1 if you're solving for slope 2. And you have slope 1 is 1/2, it's right there. Here you get rid of the fraction, multiply both sides by 2. Slope is -2 of the second line. I use point slope form. My slope is -2. And the order pair they give me is -2, 3, order x1, y1. And then you write down your formula first for point slope form. Remember the minus sign has to be there, so y1 is 3, substitute right there. x1 is a -2, opposite of -2 is a +2. It doesn't tell me how to write the equation, so what they usually give you, so that slope intercept form, they give it back to the same one. So that's what I did here. And then I distributed -2 times -4. And then add 3, and you get y equals -2x minus 1. Remember, your slope there is -2 and rise 1, so go down to +1, and then you have a slope of -2. So rise of -2, you can go down to then write 1. So I meant to say that y equals negative 2x minus 1. Start at negative 1. You can do a rise of negative 2 and your run of 1. Or you can do 2 over negative 1. So that would be essentially from negative 1 up to left 1, up to left 1, and then it kind of goes to those points right there. This student got slope of 2/3 and 2/3. Remember, slope of parallel lines would have been the same. I don't know where they got 2/3 from. I don't know. Maybe they took the 2 and 3. Not sure. Nothing in this was correct. Student didn't even try. Left it blank. 0 through a slash. That lets me know that you left it blank. Same thing here. I don't know how the student got slope of 2/3. They try to use point slope form. I guess they did put in the correct order pairs, but without having the slope there, you're not going to get anything. So the student did, they knew their perpendicular slopes, so negative reciprocal, so they have 1/2 here, and they took the opposite of that, and then they took the reciprocal of that, so flipping it, so they got a slope of negative 2, so I like seeing that. And then they substitute in the order pairs and got the right equation. Here the student wrote the equation, and they try to substitute in that order pair. Remember that at this point, so this line is graphed correctly, you need to find a perpendicular. So those are forming right angles there. So you should have a line that looks something like this, and give 1 point for trying. All right. Number 10, a projectile is launched straight up from the ground with initial velocity of 150 feet per second. Use s equals negative 16t squared plus initial velocity v sub 0 times t plus s sub 0. So I give you the equation. All you had to do was 10a, draw a picture. So we practice these in class, so these are quadratic. And we learned that your x-axis, or if let's just say that you didn't understand with the t's, you could have written it as x, right? Negative 16x squared plus 160t plus 0, and realize, so to get your 1 point for drawing the picture, you had to have labeled the x-axis are independent with time. So if you wrote time, better if it's measured in seconds, and then s here is above feet. Here the student knew it was quadratic but didn't label it, so I give them 0 points. The student knew it was quadratic, but they flipped labeling. That is a big deal. Remember, distance of how far it's traveled is dependent on the time, so time should have been down here. Student did draw a quadratic, and I also recognize that they have the units there, but remember each of the variables there, t represents time. And then, so you're trying to imply, yes, there's distance, and these are units, but would have liked to have seen time and above feet. Above ground measured in feet. So again, to get the 1 point, time and height. 10b, after how many seconds will the projectile hit the ground? So it's launched, and then it's eventually going to land. So where it lands is how much time has passed. So what you could have done there is just first to recognize that it's launched above the ground. So ground, or at ground level from the ground. So that means your initial feet above ground is actually 0. So I don't need to write 0. And the fastest way of solving quadratics is just factoring. So I factored out a GCF of negative 16t. I factored to set each of these equal to 0, and you would have gone t equals 0 and 10. So at time 0, before it's launched anywhere, it's at 0 feet above ground, right? And then after 10 seconds, then it's also. So you got 0 points for a correct answer with no work. Assuming you just put in your calculator and then you traced it, you got to show me work. So that's got to be the algebraic. 1 point for writing an equation. So if you wrote down just this equation from above, and that's you know where to go, and you substituted, then I knew you at least knew where to start. The projectile will hit the ground after time is 10 seconds. Here's an example of a student work the correct answer, 10 seconds. I told it's correct, but I gave them a 0 because SW they need to show work. Not sure if they got that from the calculator. I'm not sure if they copied it. Student had the correct equation there, so there's a check mark, 1 point. I don't know, I'm not sure how they got 144 seconds. Some students did some magic here. I don't know, took the 160, subtracted the 16 there, and got 144, it took square 12 seconds. At least that's somewhat reasonable, but if you took the 12 seconds and put it back in there, you realize that your feet, you would have been at negative feet. You can't go negative feet, or can't go inside the ground. So this student was trying to factor, which is correct. They put a 0 there. A times C, 0. B value is 160, 2 numbers, that's correct. What they missed right here is finding your greatest common factor should have been negative 16t, and that should have been t. 10C, what is the projectile's maximum height above ground B? So you could have just taken it and you could have just graphed it, and if you graphed it and then you found second calculate, you found your maximum, you already knew that the maximum height is at 400, and you could have just shown me at x equals 5. So you could have just, here's my window that I used, I wrote it down, but if you put in t equals 5, you could have just found out for it to be 400. Second way you could have found that is just finding its vertex. The vertex is essentially the midpoint of the two x-intercepts, right? Because quadratics are symmetrical. You could just fold it in half, so the halfway point between 0 and 10 is 5. If your x is 5, then you just put in t equals 5, and you could have just solved it to find your height. 4 multiple choice questions. There's 3 of them. Questions 9, 8, and 7. 3 points, that's 12. And then this last question, number 10, is 5 points, so that's 17 out of 34 as a total. Here's some good student work where the student substituted in 5, however they found that, and to show me that the height, maximum height was 400 feet. Here's some magic. Student got the correct answer. I didn't know what the rest of that said, so I wrote correct, but not work, got 0. If we'd spent 2 days on a problem like this, or at least 1 full day, student even didn't make an attempt on the last 2. So this student put in the initial velocity of 160 feet per second. They put that, instead of VO, they put that in for their T. That means in 10B they got 416, and they thought to use 416 as yeah, they should have been solving for T here, but they thought it was S, and then they used that for the other problem. And miraculously got something. Sounds somewhat reasonable, T equals 6, but not in the correct direction.